So for this, I think we will be starting off with a talk from Sarah on user experience on Near, and with that I would like to ask you to welcome Sarah Mills to the stage.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Mills, and I lead design and research at Pagoda. And although I joined this glorious Near ecosystem about 6 months ago, I've been doing product design in blockchain/Web3 since about 2016. And in that time, I've noticed something I consider a bit of a misconception in Web3, not just Near. And that's the perception that there is a great crypto UX failure of usability. People think that the biggest issues are onboarding or non-human readable addresses or friction in general. Users aren't flocking to an app or a platform, and it's because the UX is bad, and people say that the lack of usability is what is hindering adoption. So what I want to explain today is first, UX does not equal usability. It is much, much more than that. And the second, while sure, usability can always be improved, it's not the blocker. That the real great crypto UX failure is actually a failure to address two things specifically: user motivation and user awareness. So I want to back up for a second, because in order to clearly make this argument and justify the title of my talk, I need to make sure that we are on the same page about some words, the first being user experience. So I've titled this talk, Let's Talk About Our Feelings, not because I want to be as off-putting as possible, but because feelings are literally what we're talking about when we talk about user experience. Feelings are how brains interpret the world around them. And I think now that with all the studies that have been done with social media, you're probably aware of that little dopamine hit you get when you click on a notification, or you probably notice the adrenaline when you go check to see how the market's doing. But maybe you also notice the subtler feelings when you see a progress bar, or the little ding noise when you complete a task, right? Do you notice what makes you feel that something is trustworthy or scammy? So my first point is that an experience is not defined in the amount of boxes and pixels on a screen. And I think before a person can really talk in terms of how somebody else might experience something, they have to have an awareness of how they themselves are experiencing it. So step one is to notice your own feelings. What motivates you? What incentives are there in your daily life? When do you find yourself avoiding using something? What gives you feelings of confidence? So the next point I want to make is that people make decisions based on feelings. It's groundbreaking. Users of apps and products and tools have a choice of what feelings, what experience they prefer or want to have. They have a choice to try a product, a choice to use it, and a choice to keep using it. Is this going to be easier than what I'm doing now? Am I going to find what I'm looking for? Is this going to solve my problem? Is this going to make me feel stupid? So then the next point I have is that users and developers will choose desirable things. They will pick a good experience, or what they perceive will be a good experience. And, all right, that makes sense, right? That's not, So all we have to do to get to 1 billion users is just be desirable. Piece of cake. I also want to point out that there are obviously other ways of winning the market. If you Google it, you'll probably see the 4 Ps of marketing: product, price, place, and promotion. and basically just being cheaper, being first, whatever. We're focused on the product P of winning a market today. So you might be familiar with this Venn diagram, but this is basically the forces at play for a product. Is it viable? Is this business model sustainable? Feasibility would be how realistically can we make it happen? Do we have the resources, the skills, the time? And then the one I'm talking about today, desirability. Do people want it? Does it resolve their problems? Does the intended audience see the value? So now let's talk about the harder part. How in the hell do we ensure something is desirable? I'm so glad you asked, because that's what I want to tell you about. I want to empower all of you, no matter what you're building, to see the adoption that you want, that we all want, because you've made something desirable. So now that we've established that feelings drive choice and are a path to winning in the market, the rest of what I want to say to you today: users have a choice, we've got that, check. If we're going to win when users make that choice, first we need to talk about usability, and then why usability alone does not make something desirable, and then what will make something desirable enough to win, with some practical approaches sprinkled in, because I can't help myself. So I'm probably going to go really quickly, but just know that I'm super happy to talk about it later. So let's talk about what's working on our path to desirability. When I started working on this talk, I asked Bowen Wang about the early days of NEAR. And from what he shared and other stories that I'd heard, I could understand how the UX considerations of both developers and end users were baked in from the very start. They specifically made hard trade-off decisions in favor of users and developers, and there was always a desire to make things easy. And the word easy comes up a lot historically with NEAR. So this is roughly 4 years ago. Alex gave a talk where he had a slide about how NEAR wins. And it's by competing on current Web 2 developer and end user experiences. And NEAR has certainly delivered on a lot of that. The other part is that Alex is establishing a benchmark for the experience needed to fulfill NEAR's mission. It needs to have parity with the current Web 2 level of easiness. And I want to call this out because this is the addressable market I'm speaking about. A lot of us, including myself here, make things for people that are already in the Web3 ecosystem. But to get to 1 billion users, we have to look outside this community and we have to compete with Web 2 user experience. So let's just quickly go over usability. So far, NEAR is doing a pretty good job. I have included Nielsen's 10 usability heuristics for user interfaces. They have not changed since 1994. And they are usually a safe bet when you're evaluating the usability of something. And usability is usually just error prevention, learnability, indicating to the user what is happening, being consistent. Years ago, back in like 2017, 2018, the UX of literally everything in crypto was still pretty awful. These are actually screenshots I used from my first presentations about fixing usability. And the issues were systemic. Even though I have this screenshot at the bottom with some comments made during user research, it really wasn't just MetaMask by a long shot. And people would put up with it, at least really motivated people. Fast forward to today, fast forward, puns. You have a lot more product maturity in this space. Things are a lot more usable. And I think FastAuth is a great example of competing on usability for new to Web3 users that are trying to onboard. It's a way for them to quickly create accounts for any website or app that integrates with the blockchain operating system. It lets them get started right away without crypto. It just uses biometrics, phone prompts, and an email address. And it's especially usable because there's a reduction in cognitive load. It uses familiar patterns. It keeps only to what is immediately relevant using progressive onboarding. It lets people get in the front door and see what's going on before they have to give up more things and engage further. Roughly the same number of steps and requests as a competitor like sign in with Google. Clear system status, it's interoperable. And lastly, because FastAuth uses the DIG design system, it's got accessibility baked in. And here's just some tactics for improving usability or measuring to make sure something is usable. But I think this is probably the most well understood aspect of desirability, and you've already probably know about this kind of stuff. It's just generally watching a few people complete a task without helping them, which is hard, and seeing how long it takes. Do they understand the words? I mention that because you'd be surprised at the outsized impact that words have on usability. And also you can look at your analytics. Where are the most errors and drop-offs? All right, let's talk about desirability. How are you going to know if what you're making is desirable to your users? Well, first we need to define it. So to help with this concept of desirability, at Pagoda, I use an exercise called Best Product Ever with our product team. And it combines an awareness of why you personally use things that I mentioned earlier, but ultimately gives you a way to quantify aspects of an experience and make them more concrete. So the directions are just think of the best product you have ever used in your entire life, and then describe why it's your favorite in just 4 words. And while it's meant to be an informative exercise, I think it's a good start to showing that there are more dimensions to what leads a customer to find a product or service valuable. So when you do the exercise, you'll see people use words like time saver, versatile, fast, high quality, simple. People love that word, to describe their favorite products. What we find is a lot of these words, though, can be grouped or affinity mapped into broader perspectives. And that's how we learn about what our personal desirability objectives are. This is also a really good starting point to empathize with the users of your app or product. And these groups, or like themes, give us the beginning of a way to evaluate an experience. Something like, to be considered desirable by our users, our product's experience must be detectable, usable, impactful, credible, or whatever your particular users need. So we can see that there's a lot more to being desirable than just being usable. Usability is table stakes. Just because you can use a hammer doesn't mean you will have a good experience trying to open a can of beans or brush your hair or transact on Near. So to get to 1 billion users, what parts of desirability are we missing? Like I mentioned before, usability is not the blocker. So I want to explain my thinking using something called the FOG behavior model. This behavior model shows that 3 elements must converge at the same moment for a behavior to occur: motivation, ability, and a prompt. When a user behavior does not occur, or any behavior, at least one of those 3 elements is missing. So I think the biggest takeaway is that just because people can do something does not mean they will do something. An example would be you want people to show up to your meeting, and you know they are in the office that day and they are capable of walking to the meeting room. And it's an important meeting about year-end bonuses, so you know that people are motivated to come to this meeting, right? They have the ability and they are motivated. But the time comes and they don't show up. It turns out you forgot the prompt, right? You never sent a meeting calendar invite. So what if we look at this from desirability perspective standpoint? Some of the perspectives from the exercise before, I think, line up quite nicely here. If we say the intended behavior is using our product or the Near platform, and that should happen if users have the motivation, ability, and a prompt at roughly the same time. So we can say the motivator for our users is that they believe that using our product or platform is going to solve a want or a need or a problem. If the product is usable, we can say that they have the ability to use the product. And we can say the prompt is like detectability or awareness, like it was created by a marketing effort or coming up in a search. So the part I feel we need to work on as the NEAR ecosystem on the whole is that if we want the desired behavior, the adoption of our platform and use of our products, it's not the ability or usability part that we're missing, but it's the motivation or the impactfulness, how well we're solving the problem, and then prompts, the awareness or detectability. All right, that's a lot, I know. So the first step of any experience is finding it to begin with, right? The main question that you answer with this desirability perspective is, what do users need to know about using our product or app? And this can be marketing. How is your potential user exposed to your app? Does it appear when they search? Do they hear about it in a community that they're a part of? But this is also within the product as well. If you have a new feature, how does your user know about it? Where is it in the hierarchy of the screen? Is it more prominent? Does it show up when they might be looking for it? How are they using navigation? A first example I want to point out of being detectable or ensuring that your customers are aware is one you probably heard of, because you're aware. According to Sweat Economy's Twitter, they have 130 million users on Sweatcoin. Getting that volume of users is not an accident. Sweat goes where their potential users already are to build awareness. One of the most obvious places is within the Apple App Store. It's easily found by somebody looking for what they offer. They're number 17, or they were a couple weeks ago, in the health and fitness category. Secondly, while I was researching, I learned that Sweatcoin partnered with OkCupid last year to reach new audiences and build brand awareness, and has worked with other brands like Headspace and Audible. And I like this example especially because it shows a posture of experimentation. Where do we think potential users, people interested in the outdoors or interested in health, might be? Another example of awareness is the recently shipped component detail page on near.org. Specifically, the stats area for analytics. The team added this as a possible solution to an awareness need. Developers in user research said that seeing a component engagement, numbers, or analytics was critical to how they chose components to use, because the popularity or high engagement might be an indicator of quality, right? It's an evaluation awareness tool. So, making sure that you've built in awareness of your product is usually a function of marketing. Do people with the problem you're solving associate your brand with a solution? Is your product coming up when people search? But this can also be about using words that your intended audience is familiar with and testing whether or not people can navigate your app. And this will be specific to your product, but the biggest indicator is going to be people clicking that first action or the CTA. Are they aware enough to think your solution might be intended for them? All right, so the second perspective is arguably the hardest one, and basically, how well are you solving your intended customer's problem? User experience fails if we've built awareness, we've made it usable, and then we don't deliver anything of value. Are you reducing hassle? Are you providing entertainment? Are you clarifying information? Are you lowering risk? Are you promoting wellness? Are you making something faster? So I'm assuming a lot of you are familiar with jobs to be done. The core concept, though, is that people are hiring your product to do a job. And it's not the only way to understand and frame your users' needs. But in my experience, people tend to pick up on this one the fastest. And that's because when people teach it, at some point you hear people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole. And I think it's really important to understand this because it means that people are after an outcome. But there are many ways to get a 1/4-inch hole. A drill might be an efficient way to do that, but it is a means to an end. What do human beings need? What are the metaphorical 1/4-inch holes? What do people in your hometown need? What about people that are older or younger than you? And I want to be clear, I absolutely agree that owning one's data is important, and so is having an open web. But those things are 1/4-inch drills. They are means to an end, and exactly what end or outcome depends on who you ask. And I think we focus a lot on ideology and really not enough on communicating in an inclusive way the actual benefits to humans in their daily lives. One example of an impactful experience that I really love is the configure flow for Stripe checkout. It's really simple, nothing mind-blowing, but it exemplifies helping people do something better, right? So I don't work at Stripe, clearly, but theoretically, you might construct a problem statement to say users configuring their store's checkout process are making too many errors and are having to go back and repeat steps because they didn't realize the implications of their choices. How might we help them get it right the first time and feel confident in their choices? This would let them see their choices as they go and reduce errors and mistakes and build their confidence that they are configuring it correctly. We've been doing some vision work at Pagoda, and so this screen is just an early visual of some ideas that we might choose to build. But I picked it because, one, we know developers are not a monolith, and their needs and motivations change depending on how much experience they have, what project types there are, their familiarity with Web3. And so our team has a lot of potential needs to comb through and prioritize, like a need to get help from peers, a need for quality example projects. But at the end of the day, we have to ask, why are open source developers contributing in the first place? And we know from research that a lot of it is intrinsic motivation, right? Or because they really believe in the platform. But people got to eat. And not everyone is wealthy enough to contribute to projects for free. Could we grow the developer community if we found more paths to sustainability for them? So how do we know we've correctly identified a problem our users have and how well we are solving it? The first step is just stating who exactly you are building for, and asking those people about their problems. You can ask, what's hard about what you're trying to do? What have you tried before? How does that make you feel? And I'm actually completely serious about that last question, because user motivation is going to be so much higher for a solution to a problem that makes them feel enraged versus a problem that is mildly annoying. And actually, in a talk right after this, my colleague is going to tell you how to design with your users, not at them. And it streamlines all of these things from ideating to getting feedback. So check it out. Some good indicators for how well you're solving the problem will be customer satisfaction scores, support ticket topics, and then a lot of the conversion indicators in your analytics, like how many accounts have an account sign up and the first action completion in the first day. So let's recap. Yes, there is an ecosystem-wide UX failure that is standing between us and adoption of 1 billion users, but it is not usability. To compete with Web 2 experiences and get to 1 billion users, we have to address our users' needs, actual needs and motivations, and their awareness that we're solving a problem they have. So I want to come back to the slide from earlier. When I left crypto in 2020, I told myself I was done. Done with the scams and the embarrassing headlines and the constant talk about price and bag holding. And I'll admit I was skeptical this year when a friend reached out to me about coming to work on NEAR. But when the leaders in this community say that they want an open web, I believe them. I believe them because they made something that had, baked in from the very start, considerations for the humans who need to interact with what they put out into the world. And my hope is reinforced with every person I meet in the NEAR ecosystem. People who are kind and curious, people who aren't all hot air and empty promises, people who care if they're building something that will make other people's lives better, not just their own. And if there is a group that is going to pull this off, making the open web real, winning the market by building things of value to human beings, it will be this group.